Hi, it's Kane with S&B, and today we're going to be installing our replacement tank on this 2016 Mercedes Sprinter. This fits all 07 to 2018 Mercedes Sprinters that are the diesel. If you've already received your S&B tank, take out your smartphone, go to the camera, and scan over this QR code. It'll pop up on the top to take you to our most up-to-date installation instructions, and follow along there. Use this video to understand if you want to take on the install yourself, if you need help looking at something, but follow along with our installation instructions. The first step is going to be removing the shield that covers the filler neck. You can remove this with a 10mm socket. After removing the shield, we're going to be removing these 4 bolts with our Torx. This is a Torx T30. Now there's one more Torx back there. Next, we're going to be removing this steel plate, this styrofoam gasket, as well as the ground that's connected to the filler. Next step's going to be removing the electrical connector. Just a button depresses on the back, pulls out. We'll be cutting the zip tie here, and if there's any other zip ties. Then after that, we'll be removing the 2 fuel connectors. Remember which one the blue was connected to, so you don't reverse them. And to do these connectors, it's kind of hard to see, but you squeeze them together and push them out. Then the connectors pull apart. This is how I did the fuel connector. These 2 things, squeeze them and push. It comes out the end. Then it's free to release. Now with an 11mm socket, we'll remove the 6 fuel tank strap bolts. We will put a jack in the middle of the tank after we get the rear one off. Then we'll slowly let the tank out. We're going to be careful to guide out the filler neck as well. Now we're going to be removing the OEM center unit from the OEM tank and placing it onto the S&B tank, removing this locking ring. But first we're going to put the S&B O-ring on top here in the groove. So it just goes right around, sits right up nice and tight. We're going to make sure this stays in the groove when we transfer it over. Now we're going to be going over to the OEM tank. First, seeing if we can get this off by hand. Doesn't look like it. So they do make these tools. We'll have a link in both this video as well as on our installation instructions to where you can get this tool. Costs about $20. You can get them from O'Reilly or AutoZone. But we'll use this tool to remove the ring. We use the same exact style, so you don't have to worry about bolting down the center unit and making sure you get a good, really good seal, or worry about nuts backing out or putting Loctite or anything else like that. So same exact style as the OEM. We don't need this clip anymore. Pop that out. Now we're gonna lift this up We're not reusing their O-ring, we already have one. And we're gonna do our best to pour as much fuel out as we can. There's also a snake-like device that's inside the tank that we're gonna have to get out of there. Be careful not to damage the float. I don't have the snake out yet, but now I'm gonna start pouring the fuel. Now that we got the SIN unit out of the OEM tank, we are gonna disconnect the electrical connector. It's just this button back here. Let's see. Again, making sure that that O-ring stayed intact. These lines are gonna be facing towards the fuel line holders on the S&B tank. And just reverse order how we got this out of the OEM tank. Be putting the snake in, getting the float into the tank, and dropping it in. So now we're going to get this ring started and tight, just like how it was on the OEM tank. You know, we couldn't even get it off with our hands, so to make sure we do have a good seal, we're going to use the tool. Now to make sure that you got a good seal on that O-ring and there's no leak, we're gonna do a pressure test. First, we're gonna remove these fuel connectors. So this one's already off and out. Now it's released. Pull them out. I'm gonna puncture a small hole in this included cap. And we're going to spray soapy water around this O-ring seal so we can see any bubbles if there is any leaks. But we'll be listening as well. Okay, and there's air coming out from where the nozzle is in, but there's nothing, and we don't see anything coming from the O-ring area. You would see bubbles or you would hear something coming from that area if there was. And it looks like we got a great seal, so we'll end the test. Now we're going to be removing the vent hose from the OEM tank and transferring it onto the S&B tank. Be careful. If you have a better cutting tool, it might be good to use. And then this just gets pushed right on. And falls right into place. We installed this for the pressure test, so we didn't have to have a finger covering that. That falls right into there. And next, we'll reinstall this hose. We will zip tie it to this line. Now we'll be making a cut right here on the filler neck. We have these special pipe cutters, so it doesn't put any plastic inside of here, but you can just use a saw or a hand saw. Just make sure that all of this area is clean and there's no plastic in there, so you could like flush it after. But we're gonna cut right here. So you can see in comparison to the accordion. And a nice clean cut. Be placing it in, pushing it in, and then take the included S&B hose clamp. Get that all the way on, and then tighten up the hose clamp. What we're gonna do here is not tighten the hose clamp completely, because I do want this facing down in case when it is installed in the vehicle, we can tighten up the hose clamp when it's already installed. Now we're gonna be installing the filler neck into the hose. We provided 2 hose clamps for this to make sure you get a good seal. Next, we're going to be installing these plus nuts. So with the provided S&B tool, this allows you to install this plus nut without any special tools. If you have a tool, go ahead and use it, but we'll show you how to use the tools included to install these plus nuts. First, you need to identify which cross member and holes these plus nuts go into. You can see the last fuel tank strap was right there. The OEM tank went to right here. The S&B tank goes under this larger, wider cross member, so the first one behind the OEM tank, and it attaches to this first skinny cross member. So to start, these are where the plus nuts are going to go, and we're going to use the tool to secure them into place. And so this bolt that we're using to activate these plus nuts is going to be different than the bolt that we're including. And the reason we're going to be using a different bolt to mount our straps is because we don't want that bolt to be in contact with this parking brake on the 170s. The 144, there's no issue, but the bolt that we're going to use to mount the straps, again, is not going to be taller than this parking brake, so it doesn't rub on the parking. So now we're going to insert it. We're going to grab the base of this with an open end wrench. And rotate it counterclockwise until it's all the way spread out and seated. This is what it should look like when these plus nuts are installed. You can even stick your finger in the hole right here and make sure that the part behind is nice and seated. So these are in nice and tight. Can't get anything behind it, and they're ready to go to accept the bolts in the strap. Now we're going to be placing the tank underneath the van so we can put the jack underneath and lift it into place. We're going to be careful of this to make sure we don't scratch any paint, and to make sure this lines up with the hole underneath. And remember how I didn't tighten that hose clamp completely? Because we want to torque it down from underneath to make sure we can have the head facing the ground. It also helps with this part. Now that the tank's lined up, I'm going to lift the tank up, and my buddy is going to run the jack under the middle of the tank so we can get lifting it into the van. Now, before the tank's all the way into place, we're going to put this hose through the hole, grab it on the other side, push it through. We're going to connect it to this brass barb. And also, while we're here, you can see this black grommet. I'm not sure if you can see that where my finger's pointing. That grommet is for this main vent hose. So we're going to push that in. That's where that vent hose is going to stay. Now the tank's ready to go all the way up. Now with the 14 millimeter socket and the shortest strap, we're going to install the rear strap first. Now with the 11 mil socket, we'll be installing the second to the rear strap. Now that all the straps are in place, we'll torque those down, and we will get our hose clamp on both the pipe and the tank nice and tight. And we'll reconnect
this electrical connector. This is what I pulled out earlier. And also we'll be putting the seal back into place. Now we'll be installing this metal shield. This clip goes on the outside. Sits in there like that. And this will be held in by the shield that goes over this. Now we'll be reconnecting the fuel connectors. And looking at these, don't put the blue one further away from the tank just because it's on this vehicle. I have seen a vehicle with the blue one closer, so just make sure you replicate it as yours was. So we'll reconnect those, lock them, reconnect, and lock. Now we'll be reconnecting the electrical connector. Make sure it's snapped all the way in. And now we can go up and reconnect the filler hose port. Now we'll be installing the black screw to capture that cage nut. Now we'll be reinstalling this door. So the installation is complete. Now we're going to be transferring the fuel from the OEM tank back in to the S&B tank. We'll be turning the key to prime the fuel. So turn it to where you hear the fuel pump kick on, and we won't start it. We'll do that a few times to get the fuel lines primed, and you'll be all set. Let us know if you have any questions. Our number is 909-675-1313. If you're doing the install on the weekend, shoot us a text or leave us a voicemail, and we'll do our best to get back to you. Thank you.